All right, so hello and welcome to the show that does not have an intro. I am your host, Marcus,
God
along
damn.
with my sidekick.
God damn it, Marcus!
Oh my
No.
God, I've created the title. I've created the title card, Steven.
This
Marcus
show.
steals the show.
This is the podcast that doesn't have the name, and it's only Mark with Mark. Actually, I do like that. I do like that. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast that does not yet have a name. My name is Steven, and I'm here for the first time with my first guest, Marcus, one of my oldest friends, and he'll be seen on the right, and that's me on the left. What this podcast is going to be about is just every week I'm going to pull up someone that I want to have an interesting conversation with. For example, today we're going to talk about the school system, at least as it pertains to Los Angeles and how we observed it affects people over time, the type of things that we learn, things that we felt like we should have learned. And other topics that I would want to cover include differences between Japanese and American society, the significance of religion as it impacts Western culture, and so much more as I go on this journey to improve my, the intellectual side of my mind. So, introduce yourself, Marcus.
Hi, my name is Marcus. I am a third-year college student currently trying to get an environmental engineering degree, and that pretty much sums it up. I'm not really qualified in any other respect.
Neither.
Hi.
Well, neither am I. But we're both willing to learn and having these discussions. And if any one of you disagrees with us or has more to add, go on and comment below so we can keep having discussion with as many people as we can, as we hope both help mature ourselves and hopefully everyone else around us. All right, should we begin?
True.
All right, so we're LA kids, LAUSD. Let's see. I think the biggest trope with this is running out of money, and they spend a lot of money on things that aren't needed. For example, do you remember the Mac problem, or was it Mac or iPads? It was iPads, right?
It was let's see if I can recall. It was during the at some point of the drive where technology as a teaching aid was becoming popular. And one of the campaign promises that the district proposed was getting every single child access to an iPad. I think that's basic premise.
It was, and then the problem was kids kept hacking them to go on things that weren't school related every time they implemented it, and they eventually stopped. It never reached our high school or middle school or anything like that. But let's see, the thing is, they focused on that, and then actually, our high school, North Hollywood, was number one in LUSD for need of renovation. That was
If
during
I
our junior and senior year.
if I remember correctly, we did have access to some of these iPads in the classroom, but they were rife with technical bugs for whatever reason. And then, golly, I don't even remember when this started. Probably when let's see. So we were in high school at around
2013 through
2014.
2017.
2014 through 2017. Yeah, I just all I can remember now is that the iPads that we did have when for the brief period that we were allowed to use them were rife with technical difficulties, and then they were revoked. Do you remember anything else?
No, because I never even saw them on campus.
Really?
No. And the thing is, well, money like that, because it takes a lot of money to try to give um, every student in LUSD an iPad. I was actually looking at the population of biggest cities in America, and Los Angeles right now is at 12 million people. So imagine trying to fill the needs of all the kids that would be within that school district. Um, when that money could equally as go to art programs, science programs, stuff other than the math and English that everyone is required to learn, but kind of repeats itself over and over again. If I remember correctly, there's... Actually, I was learning about this because of my time teaching in middle school last quarter. But they kind of have set classes where you go over the same mathematical ideas over and over again across 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I don't know. It's just other options for what kids could want to learn are limited. And it really depends on a teacher. You need a really outstanding teacher to bring those classes to life.
One that's willing to add a little bit of variety, because at, at least from what you're describing, which I totally agree with. If anyone else has a different experience, perhaps in a charter school or a private school or there's obviously a reasonable population of people who are also homeschooled, but right now we're talking about the public school system of a very
specifically the public school system.
Yeah, of a very assembly line-esque take to education. But our experience in public high school was a little different due to what is called a gifted program.
It's a program in LUSD. Certain high schools have certain emphases. For example, Monroe High School has law and the police academy. So on top of your normal high school experience, the people in the magnet program can get a deeper experience through those specific classes. And the magnet programs tend to attract teachers that do care about those subjects. I believe Fairfax is an arts academy, and same thing with Verdugo High School. North Hollywood, where we went, is a highly gifted magnet. So it's supposed to attract the most academically competent students within LUSD and push them with college level programs. And through the initiative of most of the students, academic competitions and teams that most schools don't really have an option to. Like for what I did Science Olympiad. For a while, North Hollywood is the only LUSD team with a Science Olympiad team. And then Van Nuys High School joined because one of my former captains had a little brother who liked Science Olympiad, and he formed a team in his own high school. That was because of his own initiative. And then, what was it? Hollywood High School also did the same thing. Because of one specific professor who saw how good North Hollywood High School is doing, so he got students interested and formed their team as well. But that's because of people who were told about these different ideas, different teams that students could compete them if they had the volition themselves. And a lot of other students don't even get to know about these opportunities.
So from the experience you're citing, you're you're basically saying that that a lot of the fame that is now associated with these magnet and gifted programs is largely due to self-made student efforts in academics or achieving, or I guess, an interest in academic competitions, right?
I would agree with that. Yeah, so that's basically what I said. And I feel like if more students learn about these opportunities, or given chance, a little bit more support in whatever it may be, because there is, for all the STEM sciences, I found an Olympiad for biology, chemistry, physics, and the AMC is also just like that, but for math. And I don't know as many for English stuff, but I feel like I've heard of them. But there's one for business too. Do you remember DECA?
Yeah. What is it? DECA is short for academic
No.
Academic.
You're talking about Acadec. Acadec is general academics, of a whole range of topics: English, history, pop culture, STEM.
Does it happen to be for 5? Does it happen to have 5 general categories?
I think it does. I just don't remember. But DECA is specifically a business type competition where it tests your skills in business type endeavors. I don't remember too much of it, But arts, it was very new, and our high school started one up. Well, our magnet program started one up, and honestly, because how new the competition is, a lot of the students who did it did very well. I think two of our fellow peers made it to nationals in their first year, just of
Mm.
their own effort. And you have to give it to the Cyber Patriot team that did the same kind of thing as well.
Yeah, though yeah, I will have to say, yeah, our school's Cyber Patriot team, at least 4 years before Steven and I's years at high school began, where they won the Cyber Patriots competition, which is a cybersecurity and computer maintenance competition.
It is.
They yeah, they won that, for in case anybody didn't know.
They won it multiple times. I think they won
Multiple
in
times.
2014. They won the nationals competition, and then in our junior and senior year, a team won the national competition again, bringing it back home to North Hollywood. And
Yeah. So
the funny
North
thing about
Hollywood,
it is the school uses the HGM to act as if the rest of the school does just as well. The base school does that. When really a lot of those successes come mostly from the volition of the HGM students. You do have to give our program that. As flawed as sometimes as it can be, it does have a lot of good.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, honestly, promotion. Like, don't you find it kind of funny how it's common knowledge now that colleges all across the United States have rankings, right? National rankings,
Mm-hmm.
and a college trying to get a leg up on another college will tout its national ranking as in some sort of metric. There's a whole bunch
Mm-hmm.
to promote popularity. And even when you and I were in high school, a school like North Hollywood would do the exact same
Oh,
things.
it does. It publicizes itself because of the scores on SATs, ACTs, and academic team competitions that the HGM does. North Hollywood, the public school, is rated as one of the best public schools in the nation, and it touts that as if it had applied equally across the board across its. I think we had 2,000 students in our whole school, 2,500 maybe, but
2,500 is more
yeah,
like it.
and then about 400 of those, probably less, are the students that are responsible for most of those achievements. Because that's about the size of the program compared to the school. Every class starts out around 100 kids and slowly drops out as depending in year, but it always goes down. Because the program is
Every
difficult.
class within the magnet.
Yeah,
We should
within the
specify.
magnet. Yeah, that is much more accurate.
Yeah.
Um, what was I gonna say? Because the program in itself is difficult. It's not for everyone. You do need, at the very least, a certain kind of ethic to work for it. If you don't have the natural talent, but
Yeah, just because for the in case for any members of our audience who happen to be outside of California or unfamiliar with the of what was it of what a gifted or magnet program entails. So to as a reference point,
don't you need a
at the
certain
end of
IQ
our
level?
hmm?
Don't you need like a certain IQ level to even be in the gifted program?
No, it's not by IQ. I don't know if it's changed nowadays, but in Los Angeles County, if you're applying to the Los Angeles Unified School District, at some point you're supposed to take some kind of intelligence test administered by some psychologist.
Oh,
And the old metric used to be if you scored 99.9% on that test, you would be labeled as highly gifted and be eligible to apply to these gifted programs. But at some point, probably around 2009 or 2000, I'll say 2006 to 2009, they lowered that metric to 99, no, not, 99.5%.
Oh, I
And
remember
so,
that.
yeah, and so back to where I was getting. So you have to score well on an IQ test, and then you can apply to these schools, but there's a large waiting list. But the point I wanted to make is that at the end of our high school experience, I at least had taken around 12 AP tests, advanced placement for short. They're equivalent to oh my God,
An IB test.
IB.
Or
Yeah,
IB
IB, which
classes.
is internet. Oh my God. I'll look up what the acronym stands for right
But the
now.
point is,
But
both of those systems are college level classes. That if you're taking them in high school, you're pushing yourself to already be kind of college ready. And but the thing I will have to say about these magnet programs is the reason why they can turn out to be so successful is they admit students that they feel can rise to that kind of skill, rise to that kind of challenge, and also the parents fund it and push for good teachers and those who are willing to do things that are outside of the norm, push beyond the basic education level of the public system. Like, I
yeah,
don't
that
think
they have.
that, like, PTA groups normally have that kind of power in a public school, and it's why LA is becoming saturated with charter schools, at least in the San Fernando Valley. It started while we were in high school, but slowly most of the schools have become charter schools. Like Reseda High School, oh, what's the one? Woodland Hills? No,
Woodland Hills. Are
Taft.
you?
Taft. That's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, and then
Portola?
Portola, I believe
Serenia.
Serrania is also.
That was my sister's elementary. She actually, you can note, I noticed a difference between her education because of she went to Shirley Elementary, a public school, like a purely public school at first, and she was behind. She wasn't really in an environment which promoted learning, and then by going to Serrania in her last 3 years of elementary, she grew by bounds and bounds because there were better teachers there.
Like her, like you think that your sister was spurred, like had a spurred interest in education after going to this new school?
I think they taught the classes better, and the environment was more welcoming to learning. The format that I remember, they were teaching mathematics and and English. I remember when she was learning the sounds of the vowels and consonants, and it. How would I describe it? I remember when I was learning it. They went. This is way back in kindergarten, first grade, but basically you know it by first grade. I remember they had across every elementary school room, they had a card with the letter and its uppercase form and its lowercase form, and different examples for the different ways it could sound. And they emphasized it on the different sounds each letter made, and you would tie it to those sounds, to the letter, the sounds to the letter.
Hmm.
And Melanie, when my sister was learning it, they weren't really teaching them based on the sounds. They're teaching them words that made the sound, but didn't specifically isolate the sounds themselves. And it taught
Huh.
them a body motion to go along with it, as if the body motion would tell you what the sound of the letter was.
I mean, but like a young kid has to relate like which sound goes to what somehow, right?
Yeah, but as I saw my sister learning it, that was more confusing than than helpful. Like, they weren't really learning well to sound out words that they didn't know. As in, that sound specifically wasn't tied to the word, you had a word tied to the letter. As a one example I remember most clearly is whenever Melanie saw an S, she would go snakeity snake, because that's what she knew to tie to it. And she'd, like, curve her arm like a wave, because that's how a snake moves. Which, oh, there's this S sound in there, but you aren't tying the letter to the sound. She eventually learned it. But she was behind on reading for a while, reading and math. And the teachers at Serenia pushed her more, as in they saw even though she was behind.
Can you repeat what you
Oh,
just said? I don't know if it caught on your audio, but I experienced a brief delay on my end.
ah, when she entered Serenia, the teachers there were pushing her more, and because she was behind the other kids, and she wasn't in the gifted program initially, but as she went up from third grade to fourth grade, each teacher she had kept helping her learn a little bit faster, gave her more content, and she started getting it. And I think now she's barely in the gifted program, but she did make it. She's taking honors classes at Hale Middle School, and she's doing really
Uh,
well. And Hale is now a charter too, so she's taking photography class. There's robotics, but in all these systems that kind of are separate from the public system of LUSD, the students get a lot more different experiences in them, more avenues to find out the type of thing that they want to do. There's more to school than just learning your math and science and the history that we repeat multiple times.
hmm. Hmm. Yeah, oh man, like I haven't no, I haven't been to a charter school myself, but like once a school transitions from public to charter, and I mean there's always a little bit of a gray area because charters, at least in the Los Angeles area, are coming under
Scrutiny.
oh, not scrutiny, I would say like they're from what I understand, they're coming under more oversight because initially when charters were first created, there wasn't much legislation for their oversight, so they could specialize in anything that like they were more so of a wild west now. But given that what was I going to say? Yeah, like I would say that the capacity for students to, I guess, more so fine tailor fine tune their learning, or explore, I guess, a new style of learning really depends upon whoever's running the charter itself, and their and the quality of their parent teacher association.
It does.
Especially, yeah, especially ones that are more active, because at least if you remember, like, or I don't know, I never went to many of the PTA meetings at our high school, but
The Friends of
I never got.
HGM, they fight so hard for the kids.
Yeah, 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 but that was for the HGM. I'm talking about for
Oh,
the
the whole
public
school? Oh,
school.
I didn't know any of those. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think many parents even went to those.
Well, I can't be sure, but I can also conclude that, like, if you like, for parents that were more detached from, uh how do I say it? From an emphasis on education, right? That there'd be little incentive for the mainline school to at least improve, or how do I say it? Or embody what counts as a good education. Because there were moments where I took classes along with students that were not in the magnet program. They're a lot of them study just like every student studies. I don't want to put down the students outside of the
Except me.
magnet program. That's not my point. That's not my point here. The point is, like, the fact that I could run into a student at my high school who literally spent no time paying attention, and then in one of my classes, like during the lectures, the teacher would literally give us the answers of what would be on a test, allowed us to use those notes in order to take tests, and then the students would still fail. It was as if a lot of these kids, school was just another form of babysitting. And I feel that in an environment that's possible, there probably isn't I'll say, a very prominent parent teacher or at least one that, that constantly fights for higher standards of education. Because, like, at least in the magnet program that we're in, every well, I won't say every because that's not accurate, but a large portion of the students were um, very set on getting into particular high-end colleges, the
The
Harvard,
Harvards,
Stanfords,
Yales.
Yale's, Berkeley. Like, you can tell those children came from families that, like, if you got bad grades, oh boy,
If you got
you'd
that
get evicted.
99%, you came home with that. They're like, why didn't you get the 100? Why didn't you get the 120? So this actually goes into the next topic that I want to talk about regarding this, in that the thing that it breeds in a lot of kids is this idea that your value to society is dependent upon which college that you go to, and that if you don't go to a college, you're kind of worthless. No, not kind of. You are worthless. You're not going to mean anything in a grand scheme of things. And it's a lot more intense. I would say the more strict the academics get, because that's what I saw in my first year at HGM, and that's why I wasn't nearly a keen studier as everyone else. I still did well. I was still top 10%, still good GPA, and got into UC Davis, and I'm very happy with all that. But I was much more intent on building my character and my skills rather than killing myself for a grade. There's there's countless times where I've seen students beg to a teacher for extra credit or something to boost that grade just a little bit. Like, do you have, at least I feel, do you have no decency? Like, if you didn't do well, that's because of you. You can't blame the system of the class. Your grade reflects the effort you put in, and the amount of effort you need to put in to achieve the grade you want is dependent on your skill level and your talent. And if you want that higher grade, you got to put in the effort. That's how everyone is. I understood that about myself very well, and it's why knowing that the effort that I put in was reflective of just and the amount of effort I needed to get the grades. Honestly, some of my parents would have yelled at me, because it's much easier to get the grade that they wanted, for me at least, and not have to deal with them, than to honestly just not do it at all. That was the big motivating factor for a long time, but then I gained another one afterwards. And I think that's reflective of my senior year, but that's off topic. And what I think the flip side of what that does is the students that don't have that skill, the students that don't have that in them, and even shows in the HGM of the students at the lower end, it really does attack their sense of purpose there. Why care? If I'm not doing well in the academics, I'm not going to get into a good college, and therefore it's why try? Because I can't handle it. It's the system's not for me, it's not helping me. And according to the system, that way I won't contribute much or anything. There's no emphasis that... Actually, our school model is perfect for this. Principal Rosales stated multiple times he wanted 100% college acceptance rate across the school.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
There's no other path that you can take, and it's not the case, and it's not reality. College isn't for everyone, and even then, you can be very successful without going to college. There is financial wealth in a lot of other jobs that don't require a college degree. Now look at actors. That's actually a great example of that. Actors and athletes, such high-paying jobs, and I wouldn't say the majority. I don't know the stats, but I wouldn't say a majority have college degrees. Actually, for most of the arts, as long as your craft is good, you don't need to have that certificate. And then go well into trades too. What does it matter if you don't have a PhD or even a bachelor's or associates if you can fix any car that's thrown your way? You can build your own business that way. But people aren't shown that. People are valued based on the grades that they get and the school that they go to. Thoughts?
Yeah, if I may give a comment, it reminds me of something that I heard in one of my more recent classes in college of how oh my gosh, I forget the exact term for this, but a lot of what education, or at least what education is perceived, um, like what considers like no not what the goal of an education is to be is for an instrumental purpose. Like you go to high school so you can get in a good college. You go to college to get a good job. And one of the questions that at least you ought to ask about a mentality like that is one, is there nothing else you can gain from an education, like a well-rounded, not just how do I say it, professional skill set, but uh, personal growth or appreciation of aesthetic, or experience in interpersonal relationships, right? Like you like take a job as a salesperson, for example. Like you don't go to school to become a salesperson. Like here, I'm going to take this course on sales 101. Like if going into the economics of sales, then yeah, there'd be courses like that. But in terms of actually talking to people, that's a social skill, what are dubbed nowadays soft skills, or another thing that's partially on that vein. But when you take an examination into a field like philosophy, like unless you're going into philosophical research, the whole point of learning philosophy is just so you can understand and derive meaning from the world around you, right? It's like it's one question to ask what you're going to do, but it's another question to ask like
Why?
why should I be here, or the typical like big questions of like what is my purpose, or why is life, stereotypical abstract questions. But they're good in that they can provide a sense of perspective when actually taught correctly.
Want to know another thing that I think relates to that should be taught in schools, or at the very least in the home? I think it should be taught is emphasis on values. I would much prefer an emphasis on being good people rather than being intelligent people. For the reason that being intelligent does not make you either wise or good. And actually, intelligence can factor into people rationalizing bad behaviors and sticking to it because they can make very good arguments on why, keeping themselves on those habits.
So what would you imagine as a based education?
Talking more about ideas and discussing them. For example, um, what would be a good example of one? Actually,
Uh,
as the
I,
example
I
I had, I was talking about like traditional American values, um, the importance of freedom of speech, liberty, freedom of religion, all that, and where they stem from, their history. Like talking about those kinds of issues. So, because one thing I find is there is a lack, at least in LA, and through the students I've met up here who come from the Bay Area, a lack of pride in our community, a lack of connection to it too. Like I wouldn't say I came out of it overtly proud to be American or part of here. I wouldn't say I feel like I through the courses offered, I understood what it meant, what it means to be a part of this country, and what my country stands for.
Isn't I have to ask, isn't that more so a
What?
critique of how history is taught? Because, like, as you said, I want to learn about how these values come from, maybe with a blend of anthropology. You could learn, oh, this is the origin, or at least these are the circumstances um, that were surrounding colonial America during what is it, colonial America during when the founding fathers were around, and these are the values that they had, and this is the history of it. Like I feel that if you were just to present that,
That's fair.
then then a values based education would be nothing than math, or would, how do I say it, parallel the assembly line nature
No, no, no,
that both of us have critiqued. If
no.
anything, I think it's more so how you teach these values rather than teaching the values themselves. And I'd like to bring up the idea you mentioned of open discussion, right?
Oh, that no, that's well, that's what I would say and include. Like, I would feel like having open debate more about these issues and including them through. You can have it not just history, but through your English classes as well. Um, this you honestly would be much more interesting to discuss things like the dystopian worlds you see in George Orwell's types of writings, like different to use those English classes and history classes to speak things to discuss different ways to view the truths about humanity,
Perspectives.
different perspectives. Because I don't think we get enough perspectives. I don't think we get perspectives. That's the thing. I don't think we get a
Yeah,
good way of viewing the world.
yeah. I think that at least it's at least a lack of perspectives, I would say, is part of a consequence of this assembly line education. And I'm going to use a bit of my personal experience now. In that, so I said earlier that I came out of high school taking 12 AP tests, advanced placement tests. And in order to actually, well, you can take one of these tests sometime in June. You know, you can take, I think, up to three. No, I think you can take as many as you want in a given year, right? But typically, what ends up happening is that you take a high school course designed to accommodate this class, so you can pass the class, and then if you get a good grade on the test, then that test will give you college credit. And many individuals find that these college credits are worthwhile because, you know, taking an equivalent class in college can be expensive. The problem that comes with this is that in having a class geared entirely towards finishing a test, not to mention that there are many good arguments to be made that the school year, at least in LAUSD, isn't long enough to even give a holistic content coverage of what of all the material that should be in the class of in each classes, and you come up with and you result in a tendency for teaching in an AP class to be kind of rushed because the teachers have to cover a whole lot, and that just doesn't give you the time for like a pronounced a pronounced discussion. Now, if a teacher were say to masterfully weave these concepts into a very nuanced discussion and a debate amongst students, then congrats to them. But it just seems like something that's very hard. I don't know though if anyone has any ideas on how to do something,
No, see
do such a thing.
that specifically I think is a problem to our HGM for the fact that like other schools when they teach AP chemistry or AP bio or AP physics, they usually do 2 years of it. One year you take the honors class and next year you take the AP class. That way you have
Wait,
time to go.
really?
Yeah, that's just us. For the most part, that's what I've heard from other kids, other people.
Huh. Huh. I'll have to ask around myself.
Yeah, I think that's specifically for
Chewy.
our problem, our
I,
program. But what you
Well,
were saying earlier made me think of the classes that I felt that I learned the most, and the teachers that I did end up respecting the most. Um, well, I guess that's just a me thing. I don't give respect automatically to people, even authority figures. I wait. They had to earn it in some way. I'll treat them respectfully. Doesn't mean I take everything they say seriously. But that's more on me. But anyways, these two teachers. One for my music history class. I'll start with him. The way he structured the class, instead of just reciting facts about the evolution of music over time, the way he instructed it is to learn not only that, but to learn how to appreciate each evolution of music through each period, from the Baroque to Romantic, modern, and to take that and apply it to music as a whole, and a type of bonds that it can make through personal stories and real world events as well, and then applying what we are learning in the class to our lives. And I thought that was great. And he's been one of my favorite teachers because of that. And the other one that did the same kind of idea through environmental science. In what I think his approach was more interesting in that it was pushing us to look at something in the world and throw aside any bias we might have toward it and look at all different sides, look at the reality of the situation. For no matter what it was, be it something political or music or environment-wise, history-wise, to really look past the spin of things and to find real solutions to problems. To have these open discussions, to teach you to think. Whereas most classes are rote memorization. And because of that, I respected those teachers a lot. Because they were showing me truths about the real world. Lessons that I could take everywhere and not just memorize for a test and forget. Like, as much as I respect one of our history teachers who's no longer in the program for his difficulty and his pushing of the students to their limits, his class ultimately was like that to pass. And I think it would have been better structured if he pushes honestly, if it was just for the essays. Remove the memorization parts of it, but to grade you more so on your thinking and your own analysis of the issues that because we had to cover a lot of content, so it would have been rushed too, and the memorization was there to make sure we learned everything for the test, but that's the point of it. It was structured for the test. It would have been much better if it was wholly structured on taking these historical events, extracting meaning out of them, how we can learn how it affects us today. Like, that's much more important than how can you spell the name how can you spell the whole line of English kings, which is part of the test at all. We had a student that made a Quizlets and everyone just used that. It wasn't even reading the book, you wouldn't have to do it yourself. Everyone just root memorized the whole thing to do well. And that's why with that class I was happy with a B in that because other kids would kill themselves for the A, other kids would kill themselves and get a C, and with my own talents, luckily, I'm very appreciative of them. I could get a B without really putting much effort, and since I wasn't getting much out of the class, I didn't want to put the effort. Actually, one girlfriend, she scolded me because there was one test for English that I hadn't read the book at all, and I was a little bit nervous about it. She scolded me, was like, you're not afraid of any test, not even the history teacher's tests. So how can you be freaking about our English class? And, to be fair, she was right. And I ended up getting an A on that test without really reading the book. So I do have to give it to her. That was just a little bit of the stress that affects us all as students, getting me. Just rare. But I guess that's how I feel about how these classes should be structured as well. Because not everyone can do the root memorization. But I feel like everyone can think. People should be taught to think. See something and think, okay, why is it that way? See an analysis and try to find the premises and so understand why the conclusion came out as it did. I don't think that's taught.
Um, hmm, not really. I feel that at this point, both of us, both of us have made the same talking point, albeit in different ways. Let's see. But then taught to think.
Yeah, taught to think. Like, one reason I hate biology is for the reason, at least the way the class was structured, it's always root memorization. It's always that. And I hate it to my core because I hate that. I can't stand that. And the teacher knew that. I made it very clear. That's why she allowed me to not pay attention. I wouldn't have paid attention anyways. And she let me do my own things in the back. Because what the effort that I didn't put into the classes. And luckily, still got good grades. I put into doing things that built me out.
Yeah, if anything, this kind of sounds like that. An ideal education should be more well-rounded than it's portrayed today.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this because you bring up a good example with biology or even history or linguistics or what is it? Or any type of test you may become to be a medical professional. You have to memorize a whole bunch of things, not because it's tedious or not because it's busy work, but just as a responsible practitioner, you have to know a lot. You have to be able to identify diseases or be able to describe physiological conditions or identify a species. And I feel that at least like, instead of expanding a singular specific topic, we'll say in biology, to include all of these things, because you regardless, you're there are some cases where you just have to memorize this stuff, right?
Yeah, regardless. I'm
And
not
that
going.
and that you should encourage the oh my God, you should encourage the introduction into other kinds of fields, maybe like an application of your subject. So, um, like if someone's taking biology and you wanted them to have a focused education, right? And you don't like and for whatever reason you're against a super broad education, especially for a career, then you could have a biologist learn something regarding environmental ethics or chemistry or something or a subject that is apart from chemistry but interplays with it as well, and not just um, as what is done and what I imagine many universities across the United States are done, where you have a general education program, and if you're in a very rigorous specialized field, usually a STEM field, then a tendency I see is that this many students will focus on the classes specifically related to their field, and then when they encounter a class that's apart, often labeled a GE or general education class, they'll say, "Oh, this class doesn't matter to me. It's a joke," and then put minimal effort into it and cast it aside. And the sad thing is that a lot of those classes are, at least ideally, designed to make you think. Whether they achieve that, that's another question altogether.
Mm-hmm.
But it what you said reminded me of that parallel.
And
Now,
I
yeah,
would feel that some of the things we have discussed does apply to college. This definitely applies to college too. For some things, I think the perspective thing applies more directly to college. That there's usually a specific bubble of ideas that people are within and aren't exposed to the rest. And what I've been finding in my talking with people, and of course it's anecdotal, but a lot of college graduates, high school graduates, I mean even people in college, well, a lot of the knowledge in air quotes that they get over this time, they don't really use it ever again. They don't have the skills that necessarily apply to the workforce or just being a citizen. I've encountered people that do go to college and then agree just as $100,000 piece of paper on your wall while you're doing jobs completely unrelated to it. And I don't know. I feel like if we have this education system, it can be used much more effectively and do more for the people that are going through it than it actually is. At least at the moment. Certain people are devalued. And
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good thing. There's this is from a separate thing, but I actually was listening to MLK speeches on Martin Luther King Day, and one of them, he discusses about finding virtue in every profession. And if you're a doctor, you do that to the best that you be the best doctor you can be. If you're a lawyer, you be the best lawyer you can be. If you're a salesman, be the best salesperson you can be. If you're a street sweeper, street sweep with the best of them. All these jobs are equally valuable, and that there is pride in just working and finding your role in society. Not everyone can do every job, but what you do find that you can do, take pride in that. You contribute. It goes into the idea that every human life is valuable. The groups that you find yourself a part of doesn't make you more valuable or less valuable than anyone else. I think that's missing. Which is ironic because of all the talk about how everyone is special. I think if I could make one change, that would be the change I would make.
Yeah, there's
Putting your thoughts together, buddy.
I suppose I really don't have much else to say.
Yeah, well, I think we're in agreement. The thing is, okay, how about we talk about changing it? How would we change the system as it is now?
Oh, well.
What do you do things to promote better schools? I've heard I don't know too much about this, but I've heard of school vouchers. Where the idea is, in order to promote better schools, you gotta incentivize competition for schools, for students, as the taxpayer money in the public education system goes to the student directly, and the student gets to choose. Well, the family gets to choose what school the student goes to, so that way, you're not required to go to the closest school. So schools that are doing bad, even though they might have a lot of funding, you're not required to go to that school anymore. You can go to another public school and get a better chance. And now those schools, they have less students, will need to teach better to get those students back. And that's an idea that's been put forth. And it's kind of the idea of charter schools. It's a lottery and you try to get in most of the time. It's more luck based, but people from outside the school district can I'm not sure about the school district part. People not within the bounds of that school, like where if you live close by, you can go to it, can have a chance to go to that school. That's what the magnet program does, and it does produce results. You have to give the magnet program that, and to charter schools.
Hmm. Well, I can't help but think that you're confounding two different things. Like, yes, like I imagine having like how do I say it? Schools that with a high value and high delivery and well education open to more students. That would be a good thing regardless. Don't I don't doubt that. My thing is, I think the ultimate issue here isn't whether like schools have to compete or like with one another. It's whether as a whole, all schools, if we can lift how do I say it, the perceived value of an education from all schools and not restrict it to students who happen to get lucky and win a lottery or happen to be the first to use a voucher vouchers before all the slots fill up. And because as you said yourself, a lot of schools with strong PTA programs that push for an education because it's not just the student being there and it's not just the students themselves. Parents too can act as a force in good education. And I'm sure that in the schools that have, strong or very vocal PTA groups that value education, they don't have a problem with low education standards. But the cases that we have to examine more so are schools in which maybe the PTAs aren't all that, or for whatever reason, the students don't value education that much. Like the idea that what if get like graduating from, no, sorry, not college, high school isn't even all that important. What if you just want to
Just
um
drop out, get your GED, start working.
yeah, drop out, get your GED and working. And there's nothing wrong with that mentality.
No.
But for students like that, I feel we have to rebrand education not as a means to an end, but as a means in itself to be a better person. And
Well, I think that means turn the public education less about education and more about learning. Because, well, I value learning highly. I don't value the public education system that much. Or at least what they try to teach us.
um,
Go on.
like there's a struggle. There's a struggle currently between how the American education system and the private aspects connected to it. So private colleges, private schools, and then things that kind of tout that boundary line. How
Yeah.
well they can meet the current demands of the economy. Because there's been a trend of where what are called white collar jobs, so jobs that require a college degree as opposed to being like a salesperson or a mechanic or more so physical. I'm not
Trade.
quite sure if it is, yeah, or like a job you get from a trade school. Those have been undervalued for um yeah, those have been undervalued as the ideal, and the new ideal has been set to white collar jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And this in itself isn't, well, it's not bad in of itself. However, there's some unfortunate contingencies that we're dealing with now. One is this, because a college education is so important, most people believe that that they have to get a college degree in order to get somewhere. And so even and the tragedy of this is especially for people who unfortunately don't have enough to pay for their own private, not even private, just their own college education. College isn't free, of where they go into college and then they get a degree, get themselves into debt, and then they haven't learned the non purely academic skills necessary to either get themselves a job, or the degree they have gotten themselves puts them into a job market that's already oversaturated. And so they take a different job for which they are overqualified. And
This,
then you have another dilemma of what the current availability of blue collar jobs will be given the rise of automation. Now, there will always still be need for some, like, right, like you have to, like, everybody's always going to need a plumber, you're always going to need a janitor, or even like a salesperson, like a rep of some sort.
what do you talk about, Marcus? In the future, 2099, your piping will be able to tell when there's a clog and unclog itself. Replace the pipe all completely automatically.
Yeah, no, nothing ever goes that perfectly.
It's okay. I think automation specifically is a little bit more far off, but I do think this leads into arguments for the need for re-emphasis of values within American society and de-emphasis of status and the materialistic.
Hmm.
Like being wealthy doesn't necessarily make you a good person. Like that specifically. It doesn't make you happy also. Doesn't necessarily make you happy. I think there's more to life in that just a career is not enough to make someone complete. To make someone wise. There are other things in life that are just as important. I would argue having a family. I would argue traveling. Dealing with different ideas too. Being taught how to think. Being there's a lot more that it goes into. It's basically this whole thing about school and how people view it is rooted in a much deeper issue. And as long as that deeper issue exists, it's going to be really difficult to alter the school system in a way where it emphasizes these values and teaching people a way to look at the world. Or at least ways of looking at the world. What these values are, that could be argued about too. I'm still learning about that. I wouldn't say I've learned enough to have a full in-depth discussion about where all these different values come from, which ones they should be, but I would put emphasis on the values that built up our nation to be where we are now. The Western culture. You hear it a lot that's berated over the years, especially recently in social media. Talk about how America is racist or all these bad things, but my point is that these bad ideas, these bad aspects of Western civilization are not just there, they're everywhere, but there's a lot of good that is created. And there's a reason why we're here today, and arguing that they don't have too much of an effect, I feel is a little bit baseless, but I will have to go more in depth and be able to argue these points a little bit better.
I don't know. I don't know if that is necessarily the thing, because if the ideal education should aid someone in thinking holistically, in a well-rounded to embody embody values of a good, virtuous person, to have a nuanced view of the world, to have a multifaceted experience, a set of experiences, especially with people who are different from themselves, of different cultures, different races, different creeds, and that kind of stuff. And that comes into, um, well, oftentimes it comes into competition with, at least getting a job, because you gotta feed yourself somehow.
Well, yeah.
But
The reason I cite it is because, well, two of our three mottos for the United States are E pluribus unum, from many, one, but also liberty. Liberty is one of the other ones. That we can be a people of all these different groups and bonded together by the same ideals, and we have the free choice to make out of life what we wish of it. I think it's a good basis. I need to learn more about other cultures and their ideas. That's kind of what I'm doing now on my own individual research. And if anyone has good books to read for those kinds of things, put it below. Or arguments or studies, I'd love to hear from both sides, all sides. But so far from what I've been learning, I don't think Western ideas are that bad. Not necessarily the worst or best or anything like that, but I think there's a lot of good there that people don't hear that often anymore.
If I think a good place to start would be if schools implemented a program to have more direct interactions with one's very local community. Now, what I mean by this isn't doing volunteer work or where you volunteer at a homeless shelter or you volunteer at at an animal shelter or you do a blood drive of some sort. Not like that. What I mean is when I say local community activities, you encourage students to go interview people in their neighborhood, get to know their neighbors, and give some impetus to build communities and in a way build their own family. Because at least what I would imagine, when somebody's having a hard time, you have your significant other or you have your family members that you're taking care of that reassure you even when times are tough. There will be support for you. And if someone can start, building that kind of relationship with their neighbors, and you have a student try it out, and if their neighbor's kind of kooky or you tell the student how to be careful in case their neighbors are kooky or they live in a neighborhood full of that's unsafe. You work that into how it's taught. But the point is, if you can encourage neighborliness on a basic level, you can give people in case they don't have it a means to have a community that they can emotionally and mentally fall back on and when times get tough, and that'll give them a perspective to just using an education for simply material gains. And if that were to be the case, I feel that once people have at least learn such an alternative way to view everything that they do, because their education becomes the link of them learning about the importance of community, and through community you learn values, and through learning values everybody becomes a better person and more understanding of others. Then
go on, my bad.
Then they'd be more likely. I feel like there would be this new alternative avenue would make people more open to an education of learning rather than rather than one of purely receiving information, if that makes any sense.
I would agree with that. I actually really like that. The first thing you're going to hear, though, is, how dare you send my child to go talk to the neighbors? We don't know anything about them. We don't know if they're a rapist or going to assault my child or abduct them.
Yeah, well, anybody would have resistance to any new idea. Let's be real. We could all say the give the statement, oh, if the kid's parent doesn't care about education, then like parents suck, and that's I mean it happens, and unfortunately there's a lot of truth to that. If the parent doesn't care about a child's education, then they won't have as much impetus to pursue it. But even then, like schools have to take a hand at directing students somehow, but not become like a total what is it? A total obviously schools should be able to guide the values of their students, but we have to remember that schools themselves should not be used as a substitute for parenting in and of itself. And finding that balance is tricky, but I think it's definitely possible. And unfortunately, at least in our education experience, a
Parents
lot
are
of what happened
horrible.
was, yeah, a lot of what happened was the latter, where not students would just not care, and then the way that they demand stuff of their teachers, like they want everything to be taken care of, or they simply disre yeah, they want like either their activities to be taken care of, or their grades to be taken care of, or just a lack of respect.
Or the fact that you can't go on a field trip because, oh my god, a child might get
Yeah,
hurt.
and then the school has to worry about liability. Schools are legally liable for schools
Like,
are legally liable for children.
there's so much interwoven in there, and it goes into so many different ideas. I honestly think we could discuss this for hours. Um, like, it's just there's some people would argue, and I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. I think I would lean to agree with this, that coddling your kids, protecting them from everything, that they can't fail, that they can't get hurt, that they can't experience those things. Everything has to be kind of almost, I don't want to say utopian, but it kind of feels like that. I
Hmm.
don't know if there's a more apt word though. Like
I
protecting.
think just there's you have overprotective parents.
Yeah, but it's just the way. This is like the lens at which they view the world, the way they want it to be for their kids. Like, kids are gonna do stupid things. I know
A
I
low
did.
a low toleration for failure. There has to be some means to introduce an acceptance of failure,
Yeah,
because because overprotectiveness comes from a belief that failure in any form is bad. And I mean that there's nothing wrong with a parent wanting the best for their child, but they have to understand that like providing everything at once um, is not really the most ideal means
and that the kid
ideal
can
means
be at
for a
fault.
student. Yeah, and that the kid can be at fault and stuff. But
That
yeah, bad parenting is a whole other discussion to be had.
And I think that's gonna have to be it for another time. We're already over an hour. We're at hour 16. But this has been honestly really nice.
Yeah.
Hopefully next time we'll get to cover into these deeper issues. And maybe maybe I'll find some more statistical evidence that point to certain truths about how people are. Um, but for now, I think that was good. Any last words, Mark?
No, I'm to all who are listening, have a good evening, and if it is not the evening, then have a good day. Take care and salutations.
Yeah. Everyone have a good one. If you like this kind of discussion, leave a comment or give us a like. And if you have something you want to say, if you disagree with us, or have resources to point to, or books or anything, comment below. And we'll sure get back to you. And maybe we'll talk about it in the next one. Good night.